Greetings, Legionus. Arndelft and
Fidjesh.
here, and we are starting essentially a new series that may or may not migrate over to Fidjesh's channel when she starts it. That's essentially review and build upon episodes like this. I'm just exploring the storylines of these amazing older shows of Star Trek that I absolutely love. And I felt so doggone passionate after watching Juggernaught. I'm just like, I gotta drop a review and build upon on this. I just have to. Anyway, so to start with, yes, there's going to be spoilers here, plenty of them. And in the first part, we're talking about the Malon, a little bit of backstory on the Malon. They are a species that has approximately the same, what do you call it? Technological level as the Federation. Anyway, but what they do is they have a system that doesn't nearly have the pollution processing of the Federation's technology. They're on the same technological level, except in that area. So what they do is they take their theta radiation, they take it out in the middle of the, find areas that are uninhabited, and dump the radiation. Anyway, so there's a lot to unpack here in a lot of different areas, but just getting through it, their ship starts to suffer serious major malfunctions. And the captain ends up having to make a terrible decision. He orders this guy.
She ordered.
What?
She ordered.
The captain of this Malon vessel turned into a she?
Oh. Never mind.
Yeah, Janeway's not on this ship. The captain of this ship ordered this guy right here to go in and shut down a problem happening in the core. And he objects, saying, I didn't sign up for core work. And the captain insists that he goes down. And you see him, like, kind of terrifiedly go away. You get the, you get the impression that going down to the core, horrible. Absolutely horrible. This guy's terrified. But after the captain pressures him into it, he does so. And anyway, so cycling through here, we finally get back to Voyager itself, where it starts off with a scene between B'Elanna and Tuvok. And it turns out that B'Elanna went through another one of her extreme anger rages, which she seems to periodically be in control of her anger and then periodically not be in control of it. The writers can't seem to decide if she has a handle on that or not. Anyway, so she shattered the Doctor's camera, completely blew it to Kingdom Come. And let me see. I just realized that, yeah, let me fix this. Lock preview. Unlock it. Transform. Stretch the screen, reload preview.
Yeah, it delays when this shows what you're doing.
I'm aware of that. It has a 30-second delay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a pretty normal thing. No need to worry. Anyway. Alright, so that's fixed. Anyway, so, B'Elanna lost her temper again, and this time, Chakotay, which, leader of the Maquis, orders her to essentially take anger management with Tuvok. Which, as you could probably theorize, I don't know, they make Tuvok sometimes really adept at understanding emotion, and other times they make him really inept at understanding emotion. And personally, I think there's a lot of potential there for Tuvok to actually be really good at understanding emotion, but I feel like most of the time the writers are lighting that potential on fire and watching it burn, laughing out loud as they do so. Anyway, so they go through here, and Tuvok is attempting to teach her how to meditate. This was some of the earlier pieces of me learning to hate meditation, because I got the impression that meditation was actually like this. Yeah, I was like, meditation's stupid. Yeah, don't take what they do in these things seriously. Meditation is not actually like this. Then there's a humorous scene between Tuvok and Paris, where Tuvok's like, oh, I can't disclose what goes on between us, and he's not asking. He's like, I'm not asking for details. And Tuvok's like, well, let's just say it was a challenge. And Paris is like, well, you know what? Trying to get B'Elanna to master her temper is like trying to get a Ferengi to donate his entire estate to charity. And you see Tuvok literally stop dead in his tracks and look over at Paris. This is, the full impact of that statement hits him. He's just like, really? It's like, all right, okay. Anyway, then Voyager receives a stress call. It's the Malon freighter, which this guy, the captain of the ship, and only one other dude have escaped alive. Everyone else died. And they found them in some floating escape pods, the freighter itself drifting. The captain of the Malon freighter does convince Janeway that they need to flee from the ship because it's going to explode. But naturally, somehow, because everything disrupts the warp field of their ship. Everything does. Oh my gosh. It's just the amount of things that somehow can reach into subspace and disrupt their warp field. I don't get it. I don't get it. But anyway, so Janeway is forced to then turn around and head directly to the ship and try and board it for the purposes of stopping the ship from exploding. Disabling the explosion, all that. So she convinces these two to come with them. And then this guy talks about, there's this thing called the Fahar, which is some sort of creature that is sort of like the boogeyman of, according to the legends, they are poisonous monsters and the like. And talks about the Fahar being this dangerous creature that lives on board their freighters. And this dude is just going, it was seen, don't dismiss it. And this guy's just trying to dismiss it. Anyway, so, essentially, B'Elanna is one of those who has to go on the mission. She's going with Neelix and Chakotay and these two guys. And there's going to be 5 of them. And anyway, moving on. This is where Chakotay actually gives B'Elanna a talking down to, where he's essentially, listen, I don't need you acting like a brat on this. I don't need that. I don't need your attitude on this mission. I need your expertise. I need you coming in like a Juggernaught, dealing with your emotions, dealing with your pain and anger, and fixing this problem. It's what you do. I need your expertise, not your attitude. And the two of them have a bit of a back and forth on that, and it's really awesome to watch. I thoroughly enjoyed, actually, because, originally, he was the captain of his own ship, of the Maquis, and she was his chief engineer, and she was allowed, during the Maquis, to have a bit more of an attitude, which, as a member of the Voyager crew, that's not nearly so much permitted. Anyway, to see the back and forth here as he brings out his Starfleet training to try and bring out her Starfleet training, and to see that going back and forth, like, we're not the Maquis. Well, they never say that we're not the Maquis anymore, but that's been past dialogues between them. It's like, we're Federation now, we have to make this work if we're ever going to have any chance of getting home. Anyway, so then it moves on to Neelix and Chakotay, and this is just some very anti-theta radiation, horribly tasting mixture that the actor for Neelix sells as being terrible.
Yeah, he does.
Every time he goes to put it in his mouth, he's all like, and you see Chakotay smelling it going, oh!
I wonder if they really did make it taste gross so it could be more accurate.
That would help the actor sell it if he has to actually then put that in his mouth. But whether it tastes gross or not, I don't know. But he sells it so well. And he's just like, it's not awful enough. And he adds more of this mixture to it. And then he moves it to put in his mouth. And he's all like, he does this before he even puts it in his mouth. He's just like, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this actor is so good when he needs to be. I'm like, I feel like I'm having to muscle my way past the gag reflex just to watch this. And yeah, you can see it written here. Once you get past the choking reflex, or, gag reflex, it's like, it's really not that bad. It's like, I'll take your word for it. Anyway, and then, there's this sweet moment between Paris and B'Elanna where B'Elanna, instead of taking her anger out on Paris, as he makes a joke out of everything, and that is something that sometimes ticks off B'Elanna, instead of taking her anger out on him, as he's trying to, be light and, try to cheer her up in his way, she says this is how it's always going to be. And I think she's about to take her anger out on him. Turns out she's actually just like, it's me against the world. It's me against the world. That's how it's going to be all the time. And you really feel the emotion in that moment. I genuinely felt for B'Elanna right then. It's like her against the world. And in that moment, I empathized with her. I personally have serious anger management issues. I really, really do. And I empathize a lot with B'Elanna sometimes when the writers actually make, her into a real character. Because sometimes they completely erase characters the way they actually are and make them act completely not themselves.
Like when she was punching that little boy's face. I really felt that.
What little boy's face?
She was talking to Tuvok, and he was like, remember your first memory where you felt angry.
Oh, that requires a tad bit of context. Because it makes it sound like adult B'Elanna's punching a little boy. No.
Oh, yeah, she was a little girl.
Little girl B'Elanna was beating up a little boy who had been teasing her in school about her Klingon ridges. She was describing that in the beginning of the episode because Tuvok was having her meditate and recall some of her earliest memories where she had uncontrollable anger. And she beat the living crap out of this kid and would have continued to do so had a teacher not shown up and prevented her possibly from killing the kid. Because as a half Klingon, she's stronger and tougher. And at a younger age, the strength difference between boys and girls is much more minute. But the half Klingon side still would have made her immensely stronger even at that age. So she would have had a lot on him and would have been able to beat the living tar out of him. Even as an adult, even though B'Elanna looks more frail, she's far stronger as a half Klingon than her size would suggest. And she is tougher. Anyway, she was able to, and I'm not going to say where this happens, but she was able to take on a fight with a species that is significantly stronger than humans, and she went toe-to-toe with them and won the fight. One-on-one. A mano a mano. And that, to me, was just rather impressive that B'Elanna had the ability to do that. And it wasn't just through training and being better, it was also through sheer strength. She was able to match that guy. Anyway, so, moving on. There was this sweet moment between the two of them. I really felt empathy for B'Elanna, and I was afraid she was going to take her anger out on Paris, but she doesn't, and instead they have a bonding moment that makes me really like, I love these two. They are a super cute couple.
They are.
They are such a cute couple. I love the fact that these two got together. But anyway, they beam over to the Malon freighter, and they start scanning with the tricorders, and it turns out that the tricorders are setting off some of the particles in the Malon freighter's atmosphere. And since they've never been on a Malon freighter, and they've never had their technology interacting with Malon technology on this level, I can believe it. Your universe, your world building, I can actually believe there's been nothing to contradict this. So, at this point, I'm like, okay, so from now on, every time they go to teleport over to a Malon freighter, they've got to be careful. Their tricorders can set off some of the particles in the atmosphere and crap and cause explosions. Anyway, first thing they naturally do is they split up. They split up and go in separate directions. This is like typical horror film, like, no, don't split up! But they do. They do, and anyway, so the group of 5 splits into 2 smaller groups. One of them, at that point, though, they hear some sounds, or there was a device that needed to be activated in order for them to proceed. So naturally, one of them goes off completely alone, and at that point, you're just like, you're waiting for it, because you can tell there's something that's been watching them. And he immediately gets ambushed, and the tar gets beaten out of him. The other 2 come running up to him, and they find him, and he's like barely alive. And after, they find him barely alive, he dies right there. They teleport him back to Voyager. And I've seen episodes where doctors struggled for hours to save their patients, but when it's inconvenient for the plot, they struggle for like maybe 10 seconds and then stop. And it's like an actually dead patient. The patient is dead. That is something I'm always going to hate every single time it happens. They have a literally dead patient and they're struggling to bring them back to life for hours, which I find to be realistic. Like, just because they've stopped, you know, their vital functions have stopped, you can bring them back to life, especially with Voyager's level of technology. There's all sorts of times where certain characters are brought back from the dead, but then that never happens again because it's not a plot-critical character, or it's time for them to die, or I don't know what the frack.
Like Neelix couldn't...
there was an episode where Neelix suffered something pretty horrible. I don't want to get into spoilers on that.
Yeah, that's true.
But technology was used that helped him that was never, ever, ever touched on again. And they had access to the exact same technology, the exact same knowledge, and they never came back. Ever. And yeah, that's going to make me upset. When they have world building, but then ignore it from then on in because it's inconvenient. They don't bring it up and go like, oh, too much damage has been done to the neocortex at this point. We can't use that method that we derived from helping Neelix, because that was the one critical thing that was asked, like, is his neocortex intact? And it was. So, it's like, hey, you have a plot point to get out of it. Just be like, hey, the brain was too far damaged. There was no way to actually bring them back. They would be dead. You would just be bringing back a body at that point. There would be no person inside of it. Anyway, so they're crawling through the ship, emptying it out of crap, deck by deck by deck. And as they're doing this... Oh, this is the scene where the guy died. Anyway, they teleported him away. And they're going level by level on the ship and emptying out all the crap so that they can get up to the control room, which has all the crap in it. Well, yeah, the control room is completely contaminated, and they have to go deck by deck. They teleported to a non-contaminated deck, and they're working their way up, trying to clear the contamination from the lower decks as they make their way up to the control room. Anyway, however, this ship is in horrible repair, and personally, I feel like there are signs of sabotage. There are clear signs of sabotage. There's obviously something else going on, but because it's not time to reveal that in the plot, they don't reveal it. But I'm just like, why aren't one of the main characters pointing this out? Like, it's obvious, but whatever. Anyway, at one point, B'Elanna starts showing signs of the blights that the Malon typically have. Like, you'll see them on their faces quite often. And inside of this container right here, you see somebody just laying there. And you know, B'Elanna points out this doesn't look like a medical facility because they're taking her here because she started showing signs of their blight from the theta radiation. And he's like, she's already received a lethal dose. We have to take her to our medical ward. We have things there we can treat her with. So B'Elanna and the captain of this ship go here, and B'Elanna's like, this isn't a freaking medical ward. This is a morgue. Anyway, or she says looks more like a morgue because there's a dead worker in here. And the guy mentions, no, that was a core worker. And he explains the concept of core workers. They're the ones who work closest to the core. They work closest to the contamination, and they very rarely survive even so much as one single trip out to dump the radiation. Very, very rarely do they survive that. And after that's made clear, she's like, well, that's brutal. And he's like, they make more from their one trip than most of us ever make in a lifetime of continually doing this. And she's just sitting there going, well, who's going to collect that money? And it's like, well, our families. Their families collect that money. So it's like, especially if they're dying anyway, it's like, yeah, I could see somebody volunteering for core work. Especially if they want to lift their family out of poverty, if they want to, you know, have some life. I mean, make their lives mean something for those that they care most for. I can absolutely see that. You're sacrificing yourself to make a fortune for your family. And as long as they don't squander that fortune because they know that it was bought at your life,
yeah,
they probably won't squander it. Not to mention, you could probably put some legal terms on that, being like, they can only use it for this or that, or for their actual living. They can't. If they attempt to just squander the fortune that I'm earning for them, they can't have access to it. So you could put legal parameters onto it to make sure that your death is going to mean something. Which would have been a good bit of world building that I would have liked to have added in. And I just need to quickly point this out. The fact that a lot of these episodes are always self-contained, they're constantly like standalones, they rarely refer back to previous episodes. Like The Expanse. The Expanse has massive... I love the way The Expanse does it. Whenever
it's expansive.
It's expansive, but plots go on for multiple episodes. It's not singularly always plot just in this episode, and then just this episode, and then just this episode. Or, on very rare cases, a to be continued, where they actually get more than one episode to work with the plot. That, to me, is a relief. It's like, finally, they're getting more than one episode to work with it. But still, you know, even then, it feels crammed in. It doesn't feel like the plot has room to breathe. Alright, but moving on. There was so much potential here for more world building. At this point, though, there's some huge freaking needles that the guy then says, I've got to jam this into your neck. You'll feel some pinching, and then you'll feel some burning. And Balana actually sits there and takes it. And I'm just like... Yeah, and they're stuck into her neck, where there's a crap ton of nerves. I'm like, of all the places. The arm's one thing. The neck? That hits a nerve? What the heck is going to happen? And I was just like, oh, this is atrocious. This is absolutely atrocious. But anyway, it was atrocious in the fact that medically, I don't think that was safe or sound. But anyway...
I want to say something.
Oh, what?
So, the captain, his name is Fezzik, right?
I don't know what his name is.
Well, whatever his name is. I really like his character because Balana acts like really judgmental towards him.
Mm-hmm.
Basically towards the entire way Malon society is about
functions, yeah.
Yeah. But he just has a certain like dignity about him.
Oh yeah. At one point he tells her, "You want to know what I am when I'm not on one of these runs? I'm a sculptor. I'm an artist. I volunteer for this stuff." Well, it's like, yeah, I didn't have to go out here and do this. I do this so that our world can remain a paradise. And he describes their homeworld and how much of a paradise it is. If we didn't go out here and dump all this waste, our homeworld would be a ruined wasteland. She's like, oh, so you just go and dump in other people's places and ruin all their crap and all that so you can have a paradise. He's like, you know how much effort we go to find uninhabited places? And she should have brought up at this point, this is why I hate the self-containedness of every episode. They rarely bring up previous episodes. This was a perfect moment to do it. Remember the first time they discovered the Malon when they were in the middle of that huge void?
Yeah.
And, yeah, you know, going back into previous spoilers, but first time Balana comes into contact with a Malon, was trying to tell them how much better they could make their waste system.
And they could recycle it. Right?
Yeah, they could literally recycle it for more energy. And he actually admits this technology is completely superior to our own and would completely revitalize the way we do things. And then he rejects it off the basis of, oh, this would ruin me. This would ruin our business. And I'm just like, are you serious? Are you freaking serious? If you were the one to bring this technology back to your people, you would make a fortune. Sure, it would ruin everyone else, but it wouldn't ruin you.
Yeah.
Not unless you own the whole business. But he didn't. He owned the one ship. And if he had brought that back, he would have made a fortune. He would have been heralded as a hero. People practically would have bent down and kissed his boots for what he had done. And what's more is Voyager's like, hey, if we get back to the Malon, we'll give this technology to them. That never happens. That never, ever happens. They could have gone and completely given that technology to the Malon and helped them advance as a society. That never freaking happens. And yes, that makes me so ticked off.
I think that could be its own whole story.
Yeah, and if the Malon ended up rejecting the technology for whatever reason, that could have been its own story, and that would have been amazing. I would have loved that.
Yeah, I think there could be like a lot of political
intrigue
stuff.
and crap. And then there could have been a small part of Malon society that wanted it, that the larger, like the industry of this, the people who actually own this business, attempting to crush the movement, having so much influence over political society that they were able to influence their politicians and whatnot and put money in the right pockets to be like, no, and the politicians coming out saying, oh, we can't actually use this technology, it's incompatible, or it's dangerous, or it's unstable, and using all this propaganda, and Voyager could watch as this whole thing happened, and then the leaders of the Malon coming out and saying, sorry, Voyager, we thank you for everything you're offering, but we determined that your technology is not compatible with our own. And them knowing that that's not the truth. Them knowing that. That could have been its own episode, but instead it got ignored. The Federation is a humanitarian thing. They would have absolutely offered that technology in trade, hoping especially, like they could have bartered it in exchange for going through Malon space. And then that would have been like a huge possibility. And then they could have actually seen the paradise their world supposedly is. But no, that never happened. And to me, huge missed opportunity. Huge missed opportunity. Anyway, though, yeah, he says he's a sculptor, and he does. You're right. He does have a certain dignity about him. He does have a way about him that I really like, and I wish we could have seen this character for more than just a single episode.
Agreed.
I wish we could have seen him fleshed out so much more, and I would have just enjoyed that.
He kind of reminds me of coal miners in our world.
I've never met one.
Well, me neither, but I just imagine them being like really hardworking and
yet dignified, despite how sooty and dirty they are. It's just like, we do our work.
And there is, newer technology that is better, than
what
coal.
what they do and all that, but they still view it as a necessity. Yeah. And what they do is dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah, going down deep into the earth, there's the wrong tremor, something goes wrong, or, that whole concept of canary in a coal mine, if toxins start leaking in and they realize it, they don't realize it in time. There's so many dangers of being a coal miner. So while, no, they're not being constantly exposed to radiation, they are going down deep in the earth where if crap hits the fan, you could be buried alive. And I can think of few worse fates than literally being buried alive. To me, that concept is completely terrifying.
And I think the reaction they would probably have if you say something like that, they would probably just say what?
It's an occupational hazard.
Yeah.
Over time, every single time he's told about how much damage it's being done to his body, he says occupational hazard. He's dignified about it. And you can tell this is a guy who understands that his job is killing him. His lifetime has been cut in half by what he's going through. And it really impacted me every single time he said that the way he did. He wasn't looking at other people and going, oh, occupational hazard for it happening to them. He was talking about for himself half the time. But anyway, as the episode moves on and they get further in, Chakotay gets knocked unconscious and trapped on a deck that's been voided. Some sort of glitch happened in the deck they were currently on. All the atmosphere got voided, and Chakotay got knocked unconscious, and they managed to get him being back to Voyager.
Which was through sabotage.
Yes, that was obviously sabotage. And then this moment, I particularly like this moment, because B'Elanna just seems to be kind of sitting there doing nothing. And then Neelix comes up and disturbs her, and she's like irritated, but at the same time, she's like, I was meditating. And Neelix starts laughing at her. And it irritated me. I was like, what the heck? Why are you laughing at her? And he was just like, I just didn't picture you of all people. And she's like, don't tell anyone. He's like, my lips are sealed. And then they had this really heart-to-heart conversation about how cruddy this is. And Neelix literally says, the next time I volunteer to board a Malon freighter, have me interred in the sickbay and have my head examined. And they have a heart-to-heart about how much they're really hating this. And how much, it sucks. But they're just like, we got to do this. We've got to save... we've got to save Voyager. Because if this ship explodes, Voyager can't clear the blast radius because its warp field's being interrupted by all the radiation. Anyway, moving on. Then they actually get to the control room and they start successfully decontaminating the ship, and they start bringing some of its systems back online to contain the damage when crap starts hitting the fan again, when all of a sudden, like, the measures they're taking are obviously being sabotaged. And that's finally when Seven successfully detects that there's something in there with them. That's not Malon, human, Talaxian, or Klingon. It's something else entirely. And, yeah, it is just... Anyway, yeah. She detects that. And the doctor detects that out of the dead Malon that they got, there's alien tissue, signs of alien tissue in his wounds. It isn't Malon or anyone else's.
And hadn't degraded from radiation.
Yeah, and it wasn't degrading from radiation. But the key point is not Malon, which is all pointing towards the legend, the boogeyman of the Malon, the Vahar. And when 7 of 9 starts actually detecting the alien presence, because she's told by the doctor that they've detected something that is extremely resistant to the radiation and is blending into it, 7 of 9 adapts her scanning techniques, and that's when she starts to scan it, and she's like, this is not Malon. Anyway, as systems start getting sabotaged, Neelix, B'Elanna, and the Malon captain are desperately trying to keep systems online. At this point, plan B or C, or whichever plan they're on by this point, is to take the Malon freighter straight into a star, which if the Malon freighter detonates in the star, it'll control the explosion. It won't contaminate the entire sector, because if it explodes, it'll contaminate the whole doggone sector, which there are a lot of ships they've detected in proximity that will suffer from that. Now this is where I feel like the most damage was done in this being a standalone episode. This is where I feel the writers really fell on their faces. Because there comes this moment where 7 of 9 detects that the creature gets in there with them. Neelix gets incapacitated. The Malon captain gets incapacitated. And then B'Elanna gets attacked, but she fights back hardcore and successfully defends herself against the creature. And then there comes this moment that, in my opinion, is a thoroughly epic reveal where, let's see if I can pull up the exact shots. This is where B'Elanna, she's just barely seen the guy. Let me see if I can pull it back just slightly so you can see his face. Oh, not great mouse control. I don't know. It is an epic shot when she finally sees him. Oh, I'm skipping right past it every time. Oh, I'm going to mute it and just let it play for a second. Oh, that right there. She finally sees him. And then she can... Oh, yeah. That right there, that actually gave me chills. That gave me chills to see that when I saw the guy. I was just like, holy crap, you can barely... You can tell more by his suit
that he was
Malon than by his actual face. You got to remember, Voyager's astrometrics lab sensors, which are enhanced by Federation and Borg technology, can't tell this guy's a Malon. They can't tell. He's just an alien to their sensors. That's kind of freaky. He's so mutated. He's so changed that they can't tell he's Malon. That tells you just how far gone he is. That tells you just how changed he is. And you can do so much with that. Just think about where you can go with that. And there's a point where B'Elanna says to him, "You're a core laborer." And he's just like, "Not anymore." And then he starts to advance on her. Even though he doesn't got a weapon, and she's got, this big old, crowbar. I can't tell what it is, but it looks like a crowbar. And she's like, "Stay back!" And he kind of stops for a second, and then he keeps on coming. And she insists that he stays back, but he won't. And then he, starts duking it out with her. And then there comes the message of... There came a point where he said... No, she said, "Why are you trying to do this? You're hurting your own people, and countless innocents will suffer due to what you're doing. You're just going to cause the ship to explode. All these people suffer." And he says, "I have to make them understand." And then after that, B'Elanna's like, "Why are you trying to make innocents suffer?" And he's like, "They poisoned me." And I was like, "Dude, you volunteered to become a core laborer. You volunteered. The whole concept of the society is you volunteer." Now, what if he was coerced into it? Then he should have brought that up. He's like, "I wasn't actually allowed to volunteer. My family was thrown into poverty, and I had this thrown into my path as the only option to save them." That would have been amazing to throw that in. That's the reason why. He's like, "I was forced into this. Otherwise, I never would have been a core laborer. We were all right. We weren't rich or anything, but we were surviving. And then the politicians changed the way our sector was governed, and we were thrown into poverty. We weren't given as many jobs. We weren't given nearly as much as we had. And I didn't just have to board a Malon freighter as a worker. I had to become a core laborer, or my family was going to die." And that would have been a huge bit of world building.
Agreed.
I would have been so into that.
I have another idea.
What's up?
So, this is unlikely, but I was thinking that the guy B'Elanna met was possibly the guy that the captain sent down. And he was like, "I didn't sign up for core labor," and he didn't want to.
Well, that, I distinctly got the impression, because I've watched this episode multiple times, and I thought about that, and I examined it. This guy's not acting like that. Because if that was the case, then he should have said, "I wasn't a core laborer." The moment B'Elanna says he's a core laborer, he should have said, "No, I wasn't. I was forced to come down here." Not to mention, when things started going wrong on the ship, that was signs of sabotage. Everything was going wrong. Every backup system, everything was going wrong. And that, to me, is and those backup systems never blared alarms when they went bad. They only found out they weren't running when they tried to use them. To me, that's clear signs of sabotage. Clear signs that this guy was sabotaging the ship from inside. So, lore-wise, if the writers come out and say, "Oh, it was that guy," they've done a horrible job setting that up, in my opinion. And they've wasted it. Mind you, I do think they've wasted this character. But, yeah, I absolutely love him. I absolutely love this character. He's the tragic villain. He has suffered. He has pain. So much pain. You can tell this guy has suffered. And especially when he shouts, "They poisoned me." The dialogue is off, in my opinion, there. I wish that they had synced in the dialogue better. But you can tell he has suffered. And he's hurting. And they could have just done so much world building with that. So much world building. And I'm just like, you have wasted this amazing, amazing character. Why did you do that? And an awesome, and the idea that I was telling you earlier that they could have done is, he might not remember his family anymore. He could literally just be like, "I don't know who I even came down here to do this for. I'm wasting my life, and for what? I can't even recall their faces, their memories. I see the pictures. This picture that I brought with me. And I don't know who it is. I don't know why I'm doing this. But I'm hurting. And I'm in pain. And I have to make everyone else suffer the way I have suffered. Or something like that. They could have just flushed this guy out. And they could have done that within this episode. I hate the fact that all these episodes are self-contained. I know they had their reasons for that, but I hate it because it doesn't allow them to really flush out characters, and they always come to rushed endings as the writers are like, oh crap, we only have so much time left to finish this, quickly rush to the ending. Even so, they could have flushed this guy out more, and it would have been amazing.
Yeah, they could have cut out the end scene and added more.
Yeah, flushing this guy out, oh, fragging Terra, would have been amazing. And I would have loved to have learned more about him. But there's this moment where B'Elanna's... Oh, I know how hard it is to argue past your rage, to try and force your rage down, to act rationally. And the actress for B'Elanna is selling it here. She's like, listen, I know how hard it is to deal with the rage and the pain. And this is where she should have started talking about the Maquis. She should have started empathizing with him like, I lost everyone I cared about. Except for a few people who are here in the Delta Quadrant with me, who are probably going to die here with me before we ever get home. And she should have really empathized with him. And then he could have felt the pain in her voice and stopped what he was doing and looked up and just made eye contact with her. There could have been this moment between the tragic villain and her, B'Elanna, forcing down her rage, pain, and anger to talk with him. Just be like, they all died. And I hurt so bad. I pushed myself to feel something. I threw myself into simulations where I deactivated all the safety protocols, referencing something that actually happened in the previous episode. It's like, I was hurting so much. And I needed to deal with it. And she could start bawling her eyes out. She's like, I know your pain, alright? I don't know what is exactly like your situation, but I know what it's like to fight with your rage and your anger and your pain. But understand the fact that innocents will suffer for what's going on here. And we have technology. We have technology we can give you that will revolutionize what's going on. No one will ever have to suffer like you suffered. We can give that to you. And you can champion it. You can go back and be like, this is what they're doing. They lied. The politicians lied. More world building off of further concepts of if they had actually had an episode where Voyager tried to give the Malon technology, and because of the power of this waste dumping industry, they managed to get the politicians to say, oh, Voyager's technology actually isn't compatible, even though everyone knows otherwise. This guy could have been the pivotal point of change. The tragic story of what this industry is doing to their own people that isn't necessary. And she could have gone up to him and faced him, point blank range, eye to eye, putting down her weapon and just being like, please, you can be that voice of change. And there being this split second where you can tell he's thinking about it, where he's just like thinking and possibly about to do it. And then there being some slight triggering thing where he's like, no! And he bashes B'Elanna away. And he continues to try and veer the ship away from the star so that it'll explode out in space and contaminate the whole region. And B'Elanna's... And there was this epic moment, this beautiful moment, where B'Elanna is standing in striking range of him. And she's like, back away! And you can hear the anger and the restraint. And she doesn't want to kill him. She doesn't want to kill him. And she yells at him twice, back away! Because she doesn't want to do it. But he won't listen. and keep that scene. Keep that scene. And then finally he won't back away, and there's no more time. B'Elanna jumps forward and smashes him across the back of the head with it, and he falls down. She smashes him again until he's incapacitated on the floor, and then B'Elanna steers the ship back towards the star. And at that point, I'm just like, that would have been amazing. And then they go to the ending sequence with the captain, and she's like, she gets up in the captain's face, and she's like, first time I came across one of you, you refused our technology because of the power of the waste dumping industry, and they didn't want to lose that. And then we came back here. And in order for that episode still to have worked, the guy would have had to have been high up in the organization of the waste dumping. In order for that episode to have worked, that's what would have had to have happened. And unfortunately, that isn't what they did. And to me, that's absolutely tragic, because there could have been so much amazing world building. But yeah, and then they dump it. They just, she's just like, and when we tried to give you the technology, you refused it. For all these political reasons that we know are because of the power of the waste dumping industry. And he's just like, I'm not a powerful captain. I'm not high up in the industry. I can't force this change. And she gets up in his face and is like, that's exactly why you can. Because you're not that corrupt. We will give you the technology. Bring it back covertly. Start slowly making the change. Make the technology's plans widespread. Give people free access to it. So that once it's out there, it's sort of like releasing something onto the internet. Once it's out on the internet, there's no taking it back.
Yeah.
It's like, release it out there so they can't crush it. You can be the change. Otherwise, this will keep happening. Your life did not need to be cut in half. That core laborer did not need to forget who his family was and be in so much pain and be so angry that he just couldn't think anymore. He just wanted everyone to suffer. This doesn't need to happen. If you had taken our technology, he never even would have needed to be a core laborer. He would be back with his family on your planet, thriving and living. But instead, there's this. You can be the change. And this time, he looks up at her with that dignified look that he has. He's like, I will do this. And he vows to her that that will be done. And you'll never know for sure, because they're continuing to travel away from Malon space. So you'll never know for sure if he actually manages to make the change. It'll always be that thing that you're wondering about, that you're puzzling, like, did they ever change as a society? And that's something that in a future series, like in the Picard series, they could bring that crap up.
Yeah.
Reaching out over the stars, they could find out, oh, the Malon are revolutionized as a society. They did take the technology, they changed, or they didn't. He failed, and they're still that technology, using that waste dumping technology, or worse, maybe they've degraded as a society. Maybe their planet is now a toxic wasteland. So many possibilities for future world building. And this one episode is such a tap for that. Such a tap. Oh yeah, and I do want to bring this up. There is this sweet moment between B'Elanna and Chakotay where B'Elanna, Neelix says that she actually handled her temper very well at multiple points. And she says this awesome line, "Don't expect me to make a habit out of it." And it was just one piece of humor that really landed well with me, and I chuckled at that, and I was like, okay, yeah, I can see that. I loved it. And I loved this dialogue between them. Chakotay and B'Elanna have a very close relationship.
They do, yeah.
And it's really sweet. And I absolutely love it. And then Paris is, of course, beyond thankful that she's all right. And then there comes this moment where B'Elanna comes back to her quarters, and she gets in the sonic shower, and she's covered in grime and filth. And you could see how weary she is, how exhausted, how tired. And she's just spent. And you can feel it's not just that, it's also emotional. And I empathize so strongly with her, because when I've been fighting myself, when I've been fighting the rage, the pain, and the anger that rages inside of me every moment of every day on my bad days. On my bad days, oh, it is such a pain. And I empathize so strongly with her when there's that moment where you just release and you relax. And you just like, you want to wash it all away. And you can just feel the anger sliding off. Unfortunately, I have a really hard time releasing my anger, but I empathized with her right there, and I was just like, oh gosh. Anyway, it's nice. I was just gonna say I empathize a lot with Blana. Anyway, go ahead.
I expected, foolishly, I shouldn't have expected this from the writers because it would make it not a contained episode. But I expected that once that the core laborer, Balana killed him, right?
Yeah, if nothing else, he was left behind to die on the freighter.
Yeah. So I expected him to also be beamed out, and the doctor would look at him in sickbay and then possibly find something in his body that would be able to help other core laborers.
Oh, I didn't think about that. But that could have been a possibility. He mutated to the point where the radiation didn't affect him anymore. There could have been something sourced from his body to do that. And you could see Balana not wanting to leave him behind, grabbing his body and dragging him out of the room so that they could get a better... Because inside the core room, they had a bad lock.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they all left the core room at the end. But yeah, I could see
Seven would be yelling at her like, just leave him. We have to get you out now.
And Balana screaming back, I'm not leaving him! Having just killed him herself, hoping the doctor might be able to save him or something, but then something good coming out of it. I could absolutely see that. That would have been cool world building. It's a pity they didn't. So many possibilities just wasted, squandered. It makes me sad. But all in all, this episode was a gem. The potential, the sheer wasted potential makes me sad. But this episode was still a gem. And I highly recommend anyone who hasn't watched Star Trek Voyager, go watch it. Oh, I mean, if I were you, I'd watch Star Trek Deep Space Nine first.
It gives more context.
It gives, there are some world-building things that happen in Voyager that are very important for you to know, to watch first in Deep Space Nine. And it'll tie into Balana's character, especially since she's a Maquis. And actually, the Maquis do originally start in Star Trek Next Generation. So yeah, I do recommend you watch Next Generation first, then Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. The tie-ins are few and far between, but they are important. And in any case, yeah, these are my thoughts, my feelings, what I would have built upon with this episode, how I would have built upon with lots of other episodes that tie into this that they could have referenced, but because they like their standalone episodes, they just don't. And yeah, do you have any last thoughts or impressions, Fidjesh?
No.
All right, everybody, thank you very much for tuning in. I very much appreciate any and all support. I mean, it honestly means a lot because this is a very small channel, especially in the grand scheme of things. But I feel passionate about this. I want to share this. All storylines, no matter where they come from, I feel like it's just... Oh, I feel like Balana right now. This shot of Balana, I feel like her. I feel exhausted, but just... Especially in the world today. In the world right now. Anyway, everyone. Thank you very much for tuning in. Have an amazing day. And go out there, tackle the world. And live and thrive. Thank you very much for everything. And don't get into too much trouble. Or do. It's always up to you. Toodles.